The story begins in the 1990s when a young college student named Sudhir Venkatesh decided to walk into one of the most dangerous housing projects in Chicago. He was a sociology student who wanted to understand how people lived in poverty. Armed with a clipboard and a list of multiple-choice questions, he quickly realized that his academic approach was useless. The people living in the Robert Taylor homes did not fit into simple categories. To truly understand their world, he had to stop being a distant observer and start living among them. This journey lasted 10 years and gave him an inside look at a society that most of the world had completely ignored or forgotten. The Robert Taylor homes were a massive collection of high-rise buildings that had fallen into deep decay. While the government had built them to provide housing, by the time Sudhir arrived, they were mostly a site of crime and neglect. Over 4,000 apartments were crumbling, and violence was a daily reality. However, despite the physical ruins, there was a powerful sense of community. Because the city and the police had largely abandoned these buildings, the residents had to create their own rules, their own economy, and their own systems of protection. They lived in a world where the line between what was legal and what was illegal was very thin. One of the most surprising things Sudhir discovered was the underground economy. On paper, almost everyone in the projects was unemployed. In reality, the buildings were full of entrepreneurs. Because they could not find traditional jobs, residents used their skills to help one another and earn money. Women ran small businesses from their kitchens, cooking meals for neighbors or providing childcare for a few dollars a day. Others helped people file their taxes or even sold clothes and household items. The men performed manual labor, like fixing cars in the parking lot or repairing broken appliances that the city refused to fix. Everyone pooled their resources to survive, creating a network of support that kept the community from completely falling apart. In this environment, the law worked differently. Most people in the projects knew that they could not rely on 911. If there was a fire or a medical emergency, an ambulance might not show up for hours, if at all. Because of this, the residents learned to handle emergencies themselves. They formed their own groups to break up fights or deal with domestic issues. The relationship with the police was even more complicated. While there were honest officers, many others were corrupt. Some police ran protection rackets, demanding money from the very people they were supposed to protect. This led to a deep-seated distrust of authority, where calling the police was often seen as more dangerous than dealing with a criminal. The most powerful force in the Robert Taylor homes was a gang called the Black Kings. They controlled the drug trade in the area, but their role in the community was not just about crime. In many ways, they acted like a local government. Because the city did not provide security, the gang members often protected the elderly, walking them to the store so they wouldn't get robbed. They also enforced their own version of social order. For example, the leader of the local gang, a man named JT, required his members to stay in school and graduate. He believed that education was necessary for the gang to function effectively as a business. JT was an unusual character. He was college-educated and had previously worked a corporate sales job. He ran the gang with the same logic as a CEO running a major company. He held weekly meetings, reviewed sales reports, and used financial incentives to motivate his workers. He even used mediators, like local pastors, to settle disputes and prevent gang wars. For JT, the gang was a path to power and wealth in a world that offered him very few other options. He saw himself as a leader who was providing jobs and stability to a neighborhood that had been left behind by everyone else. At one point during his research, Sudhir jokingly told JT that being a gang leader looked easy. In response, JT challenged him to lead the gang for a day. Sudhir quickly learned that the job was incredibly stressful and complicated. He had to negotiate with community leaders, manage the personalities of various gang members, and make difficult decisions about how to spend money. The most difficult part was the violence. When a gang member was caught stealing, Sudhir was expected to order a punishment. When he refused to be violent, JT took over and beat the man himself. This experience showed Sudhir that while the gang functioned like a business, it was a business built on the threat of physical harm. The gang was not the only source of power in the buildings. There was also the building manager, Miss Bailey. She was a strong-willed woman who acted as the gatekeeper between the residents and the city government. She helped people get their sinks fixed and made sure children were fed and safe when their parents were struggling. However, she also held a massive amount of power over the tenants. She took bribes from the gang to look the other way, and she favored certain families while ignoring others. To survive in the projects, you had to stay on her good side. Like the gang, she was a mix of a protector and a person who exploited the system for her own benefit. As the years went by, Sudhir found it harder and harder to remain an objective researcher. He became friends with JT and many of the residents. He started to care about their lives and their struggles. This created a major ethical problem. As a sociologist, he was supposed to just watch and record, but he was seeing crimes happen every day. He knew that if he went to the police, he would be betraying the people who had trusted him. If he didn't, he might be breaking the law himself. He lived in a constant state of tension, trying to balance his academic goals with his personal relationships and his legal responsibilities. Ultimately, the story of the Robert Taylor Homes is a story about how humans adapt to extreme circumstances. When the formal systems of society, the government, the police, and the economy, fail a group of people, those people will build their own systems. These systems are often messy, violent, and corrupt, but they are also full of creativity, loyalty, and survival. Sudhir's time in the projects revealed that the people living there were not just statistics or victims. They were individuals trying to find dignity and order in a world that had turned its back on them. By the time the buildings were torn down in 2007, a whole way of life disappeared, leaving behind a complex legacy of what happens when a community is forced to govern itself.